I knew the moment I saw the bright orange envelope wedged between my front door and the frame that my life was about to get complicated. The return address confirmed my worst fears. Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, stamped in bold letters like some kind of official government agency instead of what it really was, a collection of bored suburbanites with too much time and too little common sense. My name is Kowalski, and I had just installed a brand new solar panel system on my roof 3 weeks ago. The installation had cost me $30,000, but with the federal tax credits and the money I would save on electricity over the next 20 years, it made perfect financial sense. I was proud of myself for making an environmentally conscious decision that would also benefit my wallet. The panels looked sleek and modern, barely visible from the street, positioned on the south-facing slope of my roof to maximize sun exposure. I ripped open the envelope and pulled out the letter, my hands already starting to shake with anger as I scanned the contents. The letter was signed by Patricia Denton, the president of the HOA board, a 52-year-old woman who had made it her personal mission to make everyone in our Phoenix, Arizona neighborhood miserable. She had been on the board for 6 years, president for 4, and in that time she had accumulated more complaints against homeowners than the previous 3 boards combined. Dear Mr. Kowalski, the letter began in that fake polite tone that barely concealed the venom beneath. It has come to our attention that you have installed solar panels on your rooftop without first obtaining approval from the HOA Architectural Review Committee. This constitutes a direct violation of Section 7.3 of the Meadowbrook Estates CC and Articles, which states that all exterior modifications must be submitted for review and approval before installation. As a result, you are hereby fined $2,000. Additionally, you must remove the solar panels within 30 days or face additional fines of $500 per week until compliance is achieved. Failure to pay the initial fine within 10 days will result in a lien being placed on your property. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each reading. $2,000. Remove $30,000 worth of solar panels that I had just installed. This was insane. I had checked the HOA rules before getting the panels. Arizona had a solar rights law that specifically prevented HOAs from banning solar installations. I had done my homework. I knew my rights. I stormed back into my house and pulled up my laptop, quickly searching for the Arizona revised statutes that I had bookmarked months ago when I first started researching solar panels. There it was, clear as day. Rs. 33-18-16, which stated that any covenant, restriction, or condition that effectively prohibits or unreasonably restricts the installation or use of a solar energy device is void and unenforceable. The law had been on the books for years, updated and strengthened multiple times. Patricia Denton either did not know about this law, which seemed impossible given her supposed expertise in HOA regulations, or she did not care. I suspected it was the latter. She had a reputation for pushing her authority as far as it would go, backing down only when threatened with legal action. I picked up my phone and dialed the number listed on the letterhead for HOA inquiries. After 4 rings, a woman answered. Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, this is Patricia speaking. Of course it was. The woman probably sat by the phone all day waiting for people to call so she could lecture them about their violations. Patricia, this is Kowalski from 4782 Desert Willow Drive. I just received your letter about my solar panels. Oh yes, Mr. Kowalski. I trust you will be arranging for their removal promptly. Actually, no. I will not be removing them, and I will not be paying your fine. Arizona law specifically protects my right to install solar panels. ARS 33-18-16 makes your restriction unenforceable. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her jaw clenching. Mr. Kowalski, the law you are referring to does not give you carte blanche to ignore HOA procedures. You still need to submit applications for approval. You still need to follow our design guidelines. You ignored the process entirely. Your design guidelines cannot effectively prohibit solar installations. The law is very clear about that, and even if I had submitted an application, you would have denied it, which would also be illegal. That is speculation, Mr. Kowalski. The fact remains that you violated our procedures. The fine stands. I suggest you consult with an attorney if you believe otherwise. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my phone, feeling the rage building in my chest. This was not just about solar panels anymore. This was about principle. This was about some petty tyrant trying to control what I did with my own property, in violation of state law, simply because she could. I did consult with an attorney. His name was Marcus Hayes, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Phoenix, a sleek high-rise with glass walls that reflected the brutal Arizona sun. I met with him 2 days after receiving the letter, bringing copies of the fine, the HOA CC and Rs, and printouts of the relevant Arizona statutes. Marcus was a heavy-set man in his mid-40s with graying hair and the weary expression of someone who had dealt with too many Patricia Dentons in his career. He read through my documents, occasionally nodding or making small notes on a legal pad. "You are absolutely right," he said finally, setting down the papers. "The HOA has no legal standing here. Arizona law is explicit. They cannot prevent you from installing solar panels, and they cannot fine you for having them. So what do I do?" You write them a response letter, citing the statute, informing them that their fine is invalid and that you will not be removing the panels. I can draft that letter for you. If they persist, we file a lawsuit. These cases are usually pretty straightforward. The HOA backs down, or they lose in court and end up paying your attorney fees on top of everything else. How long does that take? If they dig in their heels, could be 6 months to a year, maybe longer if they appeal, though that would be stupid on their part. 6 months to a year. And in the meantime, Patricia would be sending me weekly $500 fines, putting liens on my property, making my life hell in every petty way she could imagine. The legal system was on my side, but the timeline was not. What are my other options? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Pay the fine under protest and sue for recovery. Remove the panels temporarily and sue for your costs plus damages. Or you can ignore them and wait for them to take action, then defend yourself. But I would not recommend that last option. If they put a lien on your property, it becomes a nightmare to clear, even after you win. None of those options appealed to me. They all involved either giving in to Patricia's illegal demands or spending months tied up in litigation while she continued to harass me. "Let me think about it," I said. I left Marcus's office feeling more frustrated than when I had arrived. The law was on my side, but the system was designed to protect people like Patricia, to let them bully homeowners into compliance through sheer attrition. Most people would just give up, pay the fine, remove the panels. It was easier than fighting, but I was not most people. Over the next few days, I did something that I probably should not have done. I started researching Patricia Denton and the rest of the HOA board. I wanted to know who I was dealing with. What I found was illuminating. Patricia lived 4 streets over from me in a house that was, by any objective standard, in worse compliance with HOA rules than mine. Her lawn had several brown patches, a violation of the landscaping requirements. Her mailbox was faded and peeling, a violation of the maintenance standards. Her fence had a broken slat that had been that way for at least 3 months, based on Google Street View history. But more interesting than Patricia's hypocrisy was what I discovered about the HOA's finances. The association was required to publish annual financial reports, and those reports were available to any homeowner upon request. I requested them. What I found was shocking. The HOA collected over $200,000 a year in dues from the 300 homes in Meadowbrook Estates. But their expenses did not add up. They paid a property management company to handle day-to-day operations. They paid for common area landscaping, which consisted of the entrance monuments and a small park. They had insurance and legal fees. But even accounting for all of that, there should have been a substantial reserve fund building up year after year. There was not. The reserve fund was depleted, more than depleted. The HOA was running a deficit. Where was the money going? I dug deeper, cross-referencing vendors listed in the financial reports. One name kept appearing: Denton Landscaping Services. They received a contract worth $40,000 a year to maintain the common areas. Denton. That could not be a coincidence. I searched business records. Denton Landscaping Services was registered to Robert Denton, Patricia's husband. Patricia Denton had steered a $40,000 annual contract to her husband's company. That was self-dealing, a clear conflict of interest, possibly illegal depending on how the HOA bylaws were written. And it explained where the money was going. It also explained why Patricia was so aggressive about fines and collections. The more money the HOA brought in through fines, the more contracts she could justify for her husband. This was bigger than solar panels. This was corruption. I now had leverage, but I needed to be smart about how I used it. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. These meetings were open to all homeowners, though few people ever attended. I planned to be there. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood park. When I arrived at 7 in the evening, there were maybe a dozen people in the room, most of them board members or property management staff. Patricia sat at the front table with 4 other board members, shuffling papers and looking self-important. She noticed me immediately, and I saw her expression harden. "Mr. Kowalski," she said as I took a seat in the back row. "I trust you are here to discuss your compliance with the solar panel fine. Actually, I am here to observe. That is my right as a homeowner." "Of course," she said, her tone making it clear that I was not welcome. The meeting proceeded with all the excitement of watching paint dry. They discussed budget items, approved maintenance proposals, and debated the color of flowers to be planted at the entrance monument. I sat quietly, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during the open forum period at the end of the meeting, when homeowners were allowed to address the board. I stood up. "I would like to raise a concern about HOA finances." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "The floor is yours, Mr. Kowalski." "I have been reviewing the annual financial reports, as is my right. I notice that Denton Landscaping Services receives a significant contract from the HOA each year. I also notice that this company is owned by Robert Denton. Unless I am mistaken, that is your husband, Patricia." The room went silent. The other board members exchanged glances. "That contract was awarded through a competitive bidding process," Patricia said, her voice tight. "I would like to see the records of that bidding process. How many companies submitted bids? What were the terms?" I think the homeowners deserve transparency, especially given the conflict of interest. There is no conflict of interest. I recuse myself from any votes involving that contract. Recusing yourself from votes is not enough when you control the board agenda and the entire process. I am formally requesting a full audit of HOA finances, conducted by an independent auditor. I think we will find some interesting things. Patricia stood up, her face flushed. This meeting is adjourned. Mr. Kowalski, if you have concerns, you can submit them in writing to the board. We will review them at our next meeting. I will do that. And I will also be filing a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA conduct. I think they will be very interested in your self-dealing. I walked out of the meeting feeling like I had just lit a fuse. I had no idea how big the explosion would be. The next morning, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that my fine had been increased to $5,000 for continued non-compliance and disruptive conduct at board meetings. It also stated that if I did not remove the solar panels within 7 days, they would file a lawsuit to compel removal and seek a court order for additional damages. They were escalating. Good. Let them. I called Marcus Hayes and told him everything. About the financial irregularities, the self-dealing, Patricia's hypocrisy. He listened carefully, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. This changes everything, he said. We are not just defending against a bogus fine anymore. We can go on offense. I will file a complaint with the state, and we will demand an audit. If what you are saying is true, Patricia could be looking at criminal charges. At the very least, she will be removed from the board. How long will that take? Longer than I would like. State investigations move slowly. But in the meantime, we can use this as leverage. I will send them a letter outlining what we have found and what we plan to do. That might convince them to back off. Might. I was tired of might and maybe and possibly. I wanted resolution. I wanted Patricia to face consequences for her actions. But I also wanted to keep my solar panels. While Marcus worked on the legal strategy, I started talking to my neighbors. I knocked on doors up and down my street, explaining what Patricia was doing, showing them the financial records, telling them about the self-dealing. Most people were shocked. Many were angry. Some had their own horror stories about fines and violations, petty harassment that they had endured because fighting back seemed too hard. One neighbor, a retired engineer named Tom Bradley who lived 3 houses down, was particularly interested. He had been fined $500 for parking his RV in his driveway for more than 24 hours, even though the RV was barely visible from the street, and many other homeowners did the same thing without consequences. I paid that fine because I did not want the hassle, Tom said. But if what you are saying is true, Patricia has been running this HOA like her personal piggy bank. That is not right. Help me do something about it, I said. We can force a special meeting to vote on removing her from the board. If we get enough homeowners on board, we can take back control. Tom agreed. So did several other neighbors. We started organizing, creating a petition to demand a special meeting and a vote of no confidence in Patricia's leadership. According to the HOA bylaws, if 20% of homeowners signed the petition, the board was required to hold a special meeting within 30 days. We needed 60 signatures. We got 84. Patricia tried to fight it. She sent out a letter to all homeowners claiming that the petition was invalid because of procedural irregularities, whatever that meant. She accused me of spreading misinformation and trying to undermine the HOA for personal gain. But the bylaws were clear. She had no choice but to schedule the meeting. The special meeting was set for 3 weeks out, on a Wednesday evening. In the meantime, Marcus filed our official response to the solar panel fine, citing Arizona law and demanding that the HOA rescind the fine and cease all enforcement actions. He also filed a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, outlining the financial irregularities and the self-dealing. Patricia did not back down. Instead, she doubled down. She sent out another round of letters to homeowners, warning them that voting to remove the board would create chaos and instability, that the HOA would lose its insurance coverage, that property values would plummet. It was fear-mongering, pure and simple, but I knew it would work on some people. The day before the special meeting, something strange happened. I came home from work to find that my power was out. Not just my power, but the power for the entire block. I called the utility company, Arizona Public Service, and they told me there was no outage reported in my area. They sent a technician out to investigate. The technician was a young guy named Carlos who arrived in a white APS truck around 6 in the evening. He spent about 20 minutes tracing lines and checking connections. When he came to my door, he looked confused. "This is weird," Carlos said. "Your solar system is grid-tied, right?" "Yes. It feeds excess power back into the grid." "Well, someone disconnected the grid tie at the transformer, like physically cut the connection. That is why your whole block is out." "Your system was feeding the block, but when they cut it, everything went dark." I stared at him. "Someone cut my grid tie." "Yeah. And that is not something that happens by accident. Someone knew what they were doing. I can reconnect it, but you might want to file a police report." This is vandalism, and it is also really dangerous. Messing with electrical systems like that can get someone killed. My mind was racing. Who would cut my grid tie? And why Carlos reconnected the system, and power was restored to the block? But I could not shake the feeling that this was connected to everything else that was happening. Someone wanted to sabotage my solar panels. Someone wanted to make me look bad, or maybe scare me into backing down. I called the Phoenix Police Department and filed a report. An officer came out, took my statement, looked at the transformer, and wrote everything down in his notepad. He said they would investigate, but I could tell he did not think they would find anything. Vandalism cases like this rarely got solved unless there was clear evidence or a witness. I had a suspicion about who was behind it, but suspicion was not proof. The special meeting was packed. The clubhouse could hold maybe 50 people comfortably, but there were at least 80 homeowners crammed into the space, standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. The energy in the room was tense, electric. People were angry. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, her expression defiant. She called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a speech about the importance of stability and the dangers of rash decisions. "This petition is the result of a coordinated campaign by a small group of disgruntled homeowners who do not like being held accountable for their violations," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "If you vote to remove the board tonight, you are voting for chaos. You are voting to destroy the property values that we have all worked so hard to maintain." She went on for another 10 minutes, her rhetoric becoming increasingly dramatic, but I could see that people were not buying it. They were here because they were tired of her bullying, tired of the arbitrary fines, tired of being treated like children who needed constant supervision. When Patricia finally stopped talking, I stood up. "I would like to address the meeting." Patricia looked like she wanted to refuse, but the bylaws required that homeowners be allowed to speak at meetings. She reluctantly nodded. I walked to the front of the room and turned to face the crowd. "Most of you know me. I am Ian Kowalski. I live on Desert Willow Drive. A few weeks ago, I installed solar panels on my roof. The HOA fined me $2,000 and demanded that I remove them, even though Arizona law protects my right to have those panels. That fine is illegal, but this is not just about me. This is about a pattern of abuse and corruption that has been going on for years. I pulled out copies of the financial reports and held them up. Patricia Denton has been awarding contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars to her husband's company. She has been using HOA funds to enrich herself and her family. She has been targeting homeowners with fines and violations to increase revenue, all while her own property is in violation of the same rules she enforces against others. This is not leadership. This is corruption. The room erupted. People started shouting questions, demanding answers. Patricia tried to regain control, pounding a gavel on the table and yelling for order. But it was too late. The dam had broken. One of the other board members, a quiet man named Greg Foster, stood up. "Patricia, is this true? Is your husband's company receiving contracts from the HOA?" Patricia's face was red. "Yes, but there is nothing wrong with that. Everything was done according to the bylaws." "You should have disclosed that conflict of interest," Greg said. "I never knew about this." "Did anyone else on the board know?" The other board members shook their heads. Patricia had kept them in the dark. "This is unacceptable," Greg said. He turned to the crowd. "I move that we vote immediately to remove Patricia Denton from the board and from her position as president." The motion was seconded. The vote was not even close. Out of the 80-some homeowners present, 76 voted to remove Patricia. Only 4 voted to keep her, and I suspected 3 of those were her personal friends. Patricia stood up, grabbed her papers, and stormed out of the meeting without another word. The remaining board members looked shell-shocked. Greg Foster was elected interim president. His first act was to rescind the fine against me and to suspend all enforcement actions pending a full review of HOA rules and procedures. His second act was to hire an independent auditor to investigate the HOA's finances. I felt like I had won, but the fight was not over yet. 2 days after the special meeting, I woke up to find that my solar panels had been damaged. Someone had climbed onto my roof during the night and smashed several of the panels with what looked like a hammer or a crowbar. The damage was extensive, at least $10,000 worth of repairs. I called the police immediately. This time, they took it more seriously. This was not just vandalism anymore. This was a clear pattern of harassment and property destruction. They sent out a detective, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who specialized in property crimes. Detective Martinez was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She inspected the damage, took photographs, and asked me a lot of questions about who might have a motive to do this. "You have any idea who would want to hurt you like this?" she asked. "I have a strong suspicion. Patricia Denton, the former HOA president. She has been harassing me for weeks over these solar panels. She was just voted out of her position, and I think this is retaliation." "You have any proof?" "No, but the timing is too convenient to be a coincidence." "I agree. Let me do some digging. In the meantime, I recommend you install security cameras if you do not have them already. If this person comes back, we need to catch them in the act." I took her advice. That afternoon, I went to a home security store and bought a set of high-definition cameras with night vision and motion detection. I installed them myself, positioning them to cover every angle of my roof and front yard. 3 nights later, the cameras caught something. At 2 in the morning, a figure dressed in dark clothing approached my house. The person moved carefully, staying in the shadows, but the cameras picked them up clearly. The figure carried a bag and a ladder. They set up the ladder against the side of my house and started to climb. I was asleep when the motion alert went off on my phone. I grabbed it and watched the live feed, my heart pounding. The figure was on my roof now, pulling something out of the bag, a tool of some kind. I called 911. Someone is on my roof vandalizing my property right now. I have them on camera. The dispatcher kept me on the line while she sent officers to my location. I watched the feed, willing the police to hurry. The figure was working on the panels, prying at the edges, trying to cause more damage. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The figure on my roof heard them too. They dropped their tools, scrambled back to the ladder, and tried to climb down, but they were not fast enough. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing. Officers jumped out and surrounded the figure, who was now standing in my yard with the ladder at their feet. Hands up. Do not move. The figure raised their hands. One of the officers approached and pulled back the hood of the dark sweatshirt the person was wearing. It was Patricia Denton. I could not believe it. She had actually come to my house in the middle of the night to destroy my solar panels. She had risked everything, her freedom, her reputation, all because she could not handle being held accountable. The officers arrested her on the spot. Detective Martinez arrived shortly after and took charge of the scene. She reviewed the camera footage, photographed the evidence, and took Patricia into custody. "This is a clear case," Detective Martinez said to me as they loaded Patricia into the back of a police car. "You have video evidence, physical evidence, and motive. She is looking at criminal mischief, trespassing, and possibly stalking charges. This is not going to end well for her." Patricia was charged with multiple felonies. The case made local news. Former HOA president arrested for vandalizing homeowners' solar panels. Read the headline in the Arizona Republic. The story detailed everything: the illegal fine, the corruption, the retaliation. Patricia Denton became the face of HOA abuse in Phoenix. The independent audit of the HOA finances confirmed what I had suspected. Over the past 4 years, Patricia had steered more than $200,000 in contracts to her husband's company, far above market rates. She had also been inflating expenses and skimming money from the reserve fund. The total amount of money she had misappropriated was close to $75,000. The HOA board filed a civil lawsuit against Patricia and her husband to recover the stolen funds. The Arizona Department of Real Estate opened a formal investigation and eventually fined the HOA for failing to maintain proper financial controls, though they acknowledged that the fault lay primarily with Patricia. As for the criminal case, Patricia initially tried to fight the charges. She hired a lawyer who argued that she was under extreme stress and not in her right mind when she vandalized my property. But the evidence was overwhelming. The video footage was clear. Her motive was obvious. In the end, she accepted a plea deal. Patricia Denton was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 6 months of house arrest, and ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my solar panels. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Arizona. Her husband's company lost the landscaping contract, and they both became pariahs in the neighborhood. The new HOA board, led by Greg Foster, implemented sweeping reforms. They adopted clear policies on conflicts of interest, required competitive bidding for all contracts, and established an independent audit process. They also revised the architectural guidelines to make them compliant with Arizona solar rights laws, ensuring that no other homeowner would face the same harassment I had endured. My solar panels were repaired, using the restitution money from Patricia's settlement. They are still on my roof today, generating clean energy and saving me hundreds of dollars a month on my electric bill. Every time I look at them, I think about how close I came to giving up, to letting Patricia bully me into compliance. but I also think about the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when the system seems designed to protect people like Patricia. I think about the neighbors who joined me in demanding accountability, who signed the petition, who showed up to that special meeting. We took back control of our community from a tyrant who thought she was untouchable. The whole experience taught me a lot about HOAs, about corruption, and about the power of collective action. It also taught me that sometimes when you shine a light on darkness, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. There was one more twist to the story, though. About 6 months after Patricia's arrest, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Robert Denton, Patricia's husband. The letter was handwritten, and it was an apology. "I want you to know that I had no idea what Patricia was doing," the letter said. "I knew she was aggressive as HOA president, but I did not know she was breaking the law. I did not know she was harassing you or vandalizing your property. When I found out, I was horrified. I have filed for divorce. I'm trying to rebuild my life and my business reputation. I know this does not undo the harm that was done, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry." I did not know what to make of the letter. Part of me wanted to believe that Robert was genuinely innocent, that he had been manipulated by his wife. But another part of me remembered that he had benefited financially from Patricia's corruption, whether he knew the details or not. In the end, I decided to take the apology at face value. Robert had not been charged with any crimes. He had cooperated with the investigation, and holding on to anger and resentment would only hurt me, not him. I wrote back a brief note. "I appreciate your apology. I hope you are able to move forward with your life." What happened was a difficult situation for everyone involved. I never heard from him again. Life in Meadowbrook Estates returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a dramatic upheaval. The new HOA board was transparent and responsive. They stopped the predatory fining practices. They focused on actual community improvements rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. Tom Bradley, my neighbor who had helped organize the petition, was elected to the board at the next annual meeting. He became a strong advocate for homeowner rights and common-sense governance. We became good friends, bonding over our shared experience of standing up to Patricia. My wife, Rachel, had been supportive throughout the entire ordeal, though she admitted later that there were moments when she wanted me to just pay the fine and move on. "I am proud of you for fighting," she said one evening as we sat on our back patio, watching the sun set over the desert. "But I am also glad it is over. I do not think I could have handled much more stress." "I am glad it is over too," I said, "but I would do it again if I had to." "Some things are worth fighting for." She squeezed my hand. "I know. That is one of the reasons I love you." The solar panels continued to perform beautifully. In the first year after installation, they generated almost all of the electricity our house needed. Our electric bill dropped from an average of $250 a month to less than $30. Over the course of a decade, those savings would more than pay for the cost of the system. But beyond the financial benefits, the panels represented something more to me. They were a symbol of resilience, of refusing to be bullied, of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. Every time I looked at them, I felt a sense of pride. The story of my fight with Patricia Denton spread beyond just our neighborhood. I was contacted by several news outlets who wanted to interview me about HOA abuse. I was invited to speak at a state legislative hearing on HOA reform. My experience became part of a larger conversation about the need for oversight and accountability in homeowners associations. That legislative hearing was surreal. I sat at a table in front of a committee of state representatives and senators, telling my story, answering their questions. Other homeowners testified too, sharing their own horror stories of fines and harassment and corruption. The consensus in the room was clear. Something needed to change. The result was a new law passed the following year that strengthened protections for homeowners against abusive HOAs. The law increased transparency requirements, established clearer procedures for challenging fines, and created harsher penalties for HOA board members who engaged in self-dealing or corruption. It was not perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. I like to think that my fight with Patricia had contributed in some small way to making things better for homeowners across Arizona. As for Patricia herself, I saw her one more time after her sentencing. It was at a grocery store in Scottsdale, about a year after everything had happened. I was pushing my cart down the produce aisle when I spotted her examining avocados. She looked older, worn down. Her hair was grayer, her face more lined. She glanced up and saw me, and for a moment our eyes met. I expected anger or defiance or maybe shame. But what I saw in her expression was just exhaustion. She looked away quickly and moved to another part of the store. I did not follow her. There was nothing left to say. Looking back on everything that happened, I sometimes wonder what drove Patricia to such extremes. Was it a desire for control? A need to feel important? Greed? Probably some combination of all three. People do terrible things when they have a little bit of power and no accountability. But I also think about the system that enabled her. The HOA structure, with its lack of oversight and its tendency to attract petty tyrants, created the conditions for someone like Patricia to thrive. She was not an anomaly. She was a product of a broken system. That is why reform is so important. That is why homeowners need to be vigilant, to pay attention to what their HOA boards are doing, to demand transparency and accountability. Because if we do not, there will always be another Patricia Denton waiting in the wings, ready to abuse her power. In my case, the fight cost me time, stress, and money. But it also gave me something valuable, the knowledge that I could stand up to injustice and win, that I could rally my neighbors and create change, that I did not have to accept being bullied just because fighting back was hard. My solar panels are still on my roof, still generating clean energy, still saving me money every month. They are more than just a home improvement now. They are a reminder of what is possible when you refuse to back down, when you stand up for what is right, when you hold the powerful accountable. And every time the sun rises over the Arizona desert, and those panels start converting light into electricity, I think about Patricia Denton sitting in her house under electronic monitoring, her reputation destroyed, her power gone. I think about justice, imperfect and delayed, but justice nonetheless. I think about the whole block going dark that night when someone cut my grid tie, trying to sabotage me, trying to make my solar panels look like a problem instead of a solution. I think about how that backfired, how it became evidence of harassment, how it helped lead to Patricia's downfall. Sometimes the universe has a sense of irony. Sometimes the very thing your enemies do to hurt you becomes the thing that saves you in the end. I kept my solar panels. I helped reform my HOA. I contributed to changing state law. And I learned that sometimes when you stand up to a bully, when you refuse to be intimidated, when you fight back with truth and evidence and persistence, you can win. It was not easy. It was not quick, but it was worth it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would make the same choices. Because some things are more important than avoiding conflict. Some things are worth fighting for. My home, my rights, my principles. And maybe, just maybe, a better world where HOA board members think twice before abusing their power, where homeowners are not afraid to stand up for themselves, where justice is more than just a word. That is the world I want to live in. And that is the world I fought to create, one solar panel at a time.